white spot in the middle, right?
Right.
That's very soft. It's called pith wood. It's very easy to take something like this. This is a ream machine. Jam it in there. Make a tube.
You can make pipes out of that.
You could make pipes out of this. You probably don't want to pressurize it.
Yeah, right.
And if you use water, it might rot away.
So I can make my own taps for my trees right out of my earthworm. Pretty cool, right? Now, I have some made here,
It's like sterile.
and there's a couple other things you have to do. So once you have it reamed out and you got a tube, what we do is we'll shave the ends so you're just in the hardwood. That's what you would stick in the tree, and then the other end you would shave and you would put a little notch in it to hang your bucket on. So this farm is from 1751 originally, and the farmers who were here could have been making these to collect their own sugar because they didn't have a Stop and Shop to go buy maple syrup and sugar, right? All right, so that was the first process. We are an inventive bunch. And as time went on, we started making things like this. These are metal. It's very expensive in colonial times, but in the 1800s, it got cheaper to produce metal. This is a steel one. It's very ornate. It's very interesting. It's got a little spigot tip. And they made a little hook that would hook the buckets. So you'd stick this in the tree. Or this one is more of a cast. This was probably mass produced, like hundreds and hundreds of them. This cast metal one. And this is lighter weight. This is actual steel. This is probably an amalgamation of tin or something like that. But as time went on, they started making things that made it easier to collect this. And once it got easier to collect this, as my dad was telling you, people started doing it in big quantities and not just making enough syrup for their families, but to make enough where they could sell it and bring it down to the city, as he says. So that was about the 1800s. In the 1950s, in the 1920s to the 50s, they started making them metal again, but this is aluminum, lighter. And the taps, if you ever look at the maple syrup bottle you have in your fridge, you might see a picture of a bunch of trees with these on it. This is kind of the way it was for years and years and years when they were producing it to sell. And this part would go in the tree, boop, and then that little hook would hold the bucket, and you'd have your cover to keep the snow and the birds out, right?
And the rain, so it doesn't make it not free.
Right.
And what's the point of it?
Because tomorrow it's going to snow and rain. You want to keep both that stuff out, right?
What month it starts to make production?
What's that?
What month you make it starts to make production?
What month do I start? Well, as a farmer, you got to watch the weather for everything. What you are looking for is days that are warmer than freezing and nights that are freezing. So this is perfect. February is usually always perfect. Many other years I'm able to start in the middle of January or sometimes even early January.
Wow.
This year it was way too cold. I started February 1st, tapped the trees on our property, and we've been collecting since February 1st. We've collected about 250 gallons of sap already. Do the quick math, that's about 6 gallons of syrup we've collected.
In a few weeks.
In a few weeks. So, I mean, I have about 15 trees that I tap, and a lot of them are more than one tap, and if you're collecting a gallon a day on a good day, that's great. If you have a cool maple tree in your yard that's big enough to hug like this, you could take a tap and stick it in there and see what you collect. You can collect all the way up until the buds. The way I know to start is I watch the buds on the end of the trees. And when they start to swell, that means that tree is sending its sap up to grow those flowers and those leaves. And if we put a hole in that tree and take a little bit of that sap, not hurting the tree, but just take a little each day, then we're collecting. You can sometimes collect all the way up until the middle of March if the weather is good.
Yeah.
Now today it's not as warm as a really good day, but they're still running. And yesterday was what, 70 degrees? So what you want is those days that are warm enough, just above freezing in the daytime, sunny, and freezing at night, because then the sap goes up when it's warm, and when it gets to the freezing point, that tree has to drop all that sap back down into its roots. If the sap stays up there. It's water. Water freezes, it becomes ice. And ice, volume-wise, is bigger than water, right? It expands. So if all that water was up in the buds, it would break all the tree branches. And when you see tree branches that are split, it's usually from a flash freeze because the sap is stuck up there. So that's nature's way of keeping itself safe. Trees, we see that tree, right? But trees have a whole nother part of them underground, right? The root ball. And depending on what tree is what, some of them can be as big as this whole area. It's a root ball. And if you have a tree that's kind of on its own, a maple tree that's on its own and has lots of space around it and is nice and that trunk, that root ball is holding a lot of liquids. So our best producing trees, we're going to see them at the end as we're walking around, are ones that have kind of their own space and have a giant root ball because they have a ton of sap to send up there. So yeah, it depends on the tree and it depends on the weather.
Right.
But nowadays, instead of using this to make a hole, we've got power drills.
But they are more
Instead of
dangerous.
making my own spiles out of wood, we have food grade plastic. So I have a cap here that would go on the tree. I have a food grade tube here that's going to run right down. And this tube is going to fit right into my bucket, which is food grade too, and keep everything clean. So, invention, right?
What happens
more
if the ground is not, like sometimes you got valleys and...
Well, Sugar Bush is a farm that produces maple syrup. Most of them are on hillsides.
Oh, hillside, okay.
And most of them don't have buckets that someone like me has to go around and empty every couple days. They have all these little tubes. They start little tubes, and the little tubes connect to a bigger tube, boop, into a bigger tube, all the way down to their sugar shack, which is where they boil off the sap. Like my dad was saying, nowadays it's all very automated.
Yeah.
They're not even wood firing it anymore. They're using propane or natural gas. And these are all hooked now to a pump in the sugar shack. And you come in the morning, you flip a switch, and you suck all that sap down the hill. So you would have miles and miles of tubes running.
Yeah.
If you're ever up in Vermont or up in New York or in Canada, and you go to a sugar farm, they'll let you walk around and you can see it's just miles and miles of tubing, all this blue tubing, and each one goes to a tree and then connects to a main line. Those main lines
Very
go right
efficient,
down to their
very
sugar
efficient.
building.
Yeah.
What do you do? How do you know if you're not physically there? How do you know if, like, I don't know, a deer chews through one of those tubes or something like that?
Well, now instead of having to make sure your roads are clear for your horse and oxen to go up and collect it, now every late season they have to go and replace all their lines or check them at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With my supervisor, you know.
Yeah, and the lines they make now, these are called 4 seasons, which means they can stay out in the woods and nothing's going to happen to them except to the animals. You know who's notorious for doing that?
Squirrels?
No. What about
Yeah.
bears?
What about what?
Bears.
Bears?
They
I
like
don't
to
know.
sweep.
We don't have much experience with bears on Long Island.
Well,
but I
not
can tell
here,
you the
but-
squirrels like them. So, all right. So we're going to need a few things. We're going to need a tap. Who would like to help me carry some things? I'm going to give you this. Let's see, what else do we need? I think we're going to need some of this. And maybe one of these. And how about you hold this for me? Okay. All right, I think we're ready. Should we go check out the trees?